pregnant wife watched Billionaire marry Mistress years later, he begged her back. A single choice can fracture the life you thought you knew, scattering hope like shards of glass. In this story, a young wife witnesses the unimaginable, her husband pledging forever to another woman while she carries his child. Set against the tantalizing glare of wealth and status, this tale explores the agony of betrayal and the sheer willpower required to rebuild from the wreckage. Prepare for a deeply human journey where broken hearts fight to heal, and the shadow of past mistakes looms over every step forward. Stay with me as we uncover how love can be lost, reclaimed, and reshaped by time. Alina Brooks had spent most of her life embracing ordinary wonders. Raised in a blue-collar neighborhood of Chicago, her world was built around close-knit family gatherings and after-school jobs that paid just enough to cover her textbooks and bus fare. She was the first in her family to ever dream of attending college, eyeing scholarships with quiet determination. Despite the challenges, she held a natural optimism that life had something special in store. It was during her third year at a local community college when she met Maxwell Pierce. He was every bit as intriguing as he was intimidating, sharp jawline, dark hair slicked back with an air of confidence that felt almost otherworldly in their humble academic halls. People whispered about his trust fund, about connections he had in the business world. Yet, on the afternoon he first approached Alina by the campus library, he was simply a well-dressed student asking for help on a difficult economics assignment. They bonded over late-night study sessions at a nearby Starbucks, where Alina sipped her caramel latte while Maxwell discussed his lofty ambitions. From real estate investments to philanthropic dreams, he painted a future shimmering with possibility. And Alina, with her radiant smile and unwavering kindness, became the calm center in Maxwell's whirlwind. Soon enough, their study sessions morphed into affectionate strolls around campus, shared jokes, and a mutual desire to see each other thrive. It was a union of opposites that promised to ignite a spark neither had ever known. As their relationship progressed, Maxwell invited Alina into corners of life she'd only glimpsed in magazines. He took her to galas in gleaming hotel ballrooms, introducing her to executives and celebrity entrepreneurs as if he'd known them for decades. She watched wide-eyed as Maxwell navigated these lavish affairs with the poise of someone who had grown up among the elite. Yet behind every handshake and polished smile, he stole glances at Alina, making sure she was comfortable. In those early days, Alina learned that Maxwell was no mere student. Yes, he attended classes, but more out of curiosity than necessity. He'd inherited a sizable fortune at a young age, and though he never flaunted it directly, his wealth was evident in the sleek sports car he drove and the penthouse he maintained in the heart of downtown Chicago. For Alina, who counted every dollar, Maxwell's opulent world felt surreal. She tried to keep up, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation every time she slipped into a designer dress he had spontaneously gifted her. Despite the glitter, Maxwell seemed more invested in Alina than in the social currency these events provided. He'd beam whenever she laughed at his silly jokes and took genuine interest in her community service projects. She found him equally attentive at casual dinners in her small apartment, equally enthralled by her grandmother's old recipes. Over time, Alina let her guard down, slowly accepting that Maxwell's wealth didn't define him. Instead, she saw a man driven by big dreams, thirsty for success, but still seeking a sense of grounding that he found in her presence. On a brilliant summer evening, Maxwell proposed to Alina at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. Tiny fairy lights glimmered around them, and the city's skyline seemed to sparkle in celebration. His voice trembled with emotion as he slipped a Tiffany and Company diamond ring onto her finger, pledging his life and love to her. Overcome with joy, Alina said yes. For a moment, every doubt about their differences in upbringing evaporated into the night air, replaced by a unity that felt destined. Their engagement stirred excitement in both families. Alina's parents, modest and unassuming, were floored by the grandeur Maxwell represented but welcomed him with open arms. Maxwell's mother, Caroline, came from old money and was initially skeptical of Alina's background. However, she softened upon seeing how genuinely her son adored this warm-hearted young woman. Plans for the wedding started in earnest. Though Maxwell's family leaned toward an extravagant event, Alina advocated for something more intimate and meaningful. Ultimately, they struck a balance. A sleek ceremony in a garden estate just outside Chicago, where crystal chandeliers would hang from a large tent set up under ancient oak trees. Alina felt a giddy excitement bloom inside her. She imagined walking down the aisle, past rows of smiling faces, to meet Maxwell's steady gaze at the altar. It was a vision that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. As they inched closer to the wedding date, however, Alina noticed a shift in Maxwell. He seemed preoccupied, often lost in thought about a new business venture he was spearheading. Some nights he'd miss dinner, claiming urgent meetings or last-minute deals. Still, Alina convinced herself it was just the stress of balancing an expanding empire with the final stretch of wedding preparations. She told herself that once they said their vows, everything would settle into a blissful, shared future. 2 months before the wedding, Alina woke one morning feeling dizzy and queasy. She chalked it up to nerves. Perhaps the wedding stress was catching up. But as the days wore on and the nausea persisted, a small seed of suspicion took root in her mind. With trembling hands, she bought a pregnancy test from the local pharmacy and slipped into the bathroom of her cramped apartment. Minutes later, her world pivoted when she saw the faint pink lines confirming what her heart had begun to suspect. She was pregnant. The realization brought a chaotic blend of excitement and fear. She thought about how Maxwell would react. Would he be overjoyed to start a family, or would he view it as an unexpected detour from his carefully charted path? Alina sat on the edge of her bed, holding the test, her mind racing with possibilities. A wave of emotion washed over her, from awe at the new life forming inside her to an unshakable worry about how it might change everything. That night, she planned a romantic dinner in her tiny kitchen to share the news. Candles flickered and the scent of rosemary chicken filled the air. But Maxwell arrived late, phone clutched to his ear, stress etched into his features. She hesitated, catching fragments of his conversation about an upcoming deal. Still, when he finally hung up and looked her way, she could see his concern melt into tenderness. She took his hand, led him to the table, and gently told him they were going to be parents. His eyes widened, and for an instant she caught a glimpse of raw, unfiltered joy. He wrapped her in a tight embrace, whispering how much he loved her. In that fragile moment, Alina felt reassured whatever burdens lay ahead, they would face them together. Soon after Alina's pregnancy announcement, Maxwell's demeanor shifted again. He showered her with gifts, a larger apartment, a more luxurious car, but seemed distant in the day-to-day. At first, Alina assumed he was simply overcompensating, trying to show his support through material gestures. Yet, late-night phone calls became more frequent. He'd slip out of bed to answer them in hushed tones or send texts with an urgency that made Alina's skin prickle. One afternoon, while rummaging through a kitchen drawer for a pen, Alina stumbled upon a business card for Veronica Hall. The back bore a handwritten note about meeting times and restaurant names she didn't recognize. Something about the scrawled handwriting looked intimate. Alarm bells rang, but Alina pushed her suspicions aside, telling herself it could be a new associate, an assistant, or perhaps a financial consultant. Maxwell had a habit of networking extensively. She had no evidence to assume otherwise. Still, an uneasy feeling gnawed at the edges of her mind. Maxwell started cancelling important appointments, like the ultrasound they had planned to attend together. The baby's future room remained half-finished, boxes of furniture untouched. Instead of the cozy nights, she'd imagined where they would flip through baby name books and daydream about the nursery. Alina found herself alone, cradling the soft flutter of life in her belly while Maxwell was off closing deals or tending to mysterious calls. A pit of anxiety formed in her stomach, a swirl of dread and heartbreak she tried to ignore. She reminded herself that relationships required trust. Maxwell had asked for her faith. She told herself to believe in him, to cling to the sweet words he had whispered when she first shared the news. After all, the wedding was only a few weeks away. Surely all couples faced challenges before the big day, didn't they? With the wedding date just a month away, invitations had already been sent to friends, family, and notable figures in Chicago's elite circles. Alina's dress fittings were nearly complete. Every delicate lace detail a promise of the day she had spent weeks dreaming about. But a subtle tension thickened the air around her and Maxwell. He missed yet another doctor's appointment. When he apologized afterward, Alina could hear only the hollow ring of worn-out excuses. Then came the day that shattered her illusions. While checking the mail one morning, Alina discovered an envelope from a luxury event planner she hadn't hired. Curious, she tore it open. Inside, she found receipts, invoices, and a series of meticulously outlined plans for an extravagant ceremony set to take place in a remote resort outside of Chicago, a place she'd never heard of, for an event that clearly wasn't theirs. As she flipped through the pages, her breath caught at the names: Maxwell Pierce and Veronica Hall. At first, her brain refused to comprehend. The words sat on the page like a cruel joke. She examined the dates. The ceremony was scheduled for just a week before her own wedding day. Fury and confusion warred within her. Could it be a business event mislabeled as a ceremony? Could this be an elaborate misunderstanding? Heart-hammering, she dialed Maxwell's number. No answer. She tried again, then again, before leaving a voice message that came out in stilted, panicked gasps. She spent that entire day pacing the living room, the rest of the documents spread out on the coffee table like evidence in a crime scene. By evening, when Maxwell finally returned her call, she heard no denial, only the ragged inhalation of someone caught in a lie. Her voice broke. "Is it true? Are you marrying another woman?" Silence on the line was all the confirmation she needed. Days blurred into a surreal nightmare. Through whispered phone calls and half-truths, Maxwell confessed that he had entered into some form of arrangement with Veronica Hall, an arrangement that escalated into a private wedding. The specifics were murky. He claimed it was a business strategy, a move to cement a partnership with Veronica's influential family. Alina's mind reeled. How could marriage be reduced to a transaction? She was nearly 5 months pregnant, her unborn child turning and twisting in her womb. Yet the father of that child was about to say vows to someone else. The humiliation felt unbearable. Attempts to talk reason with him were fruitless. Maxwell either deflected or insisted. He had no choice. Veronica, he said, held the key to critical mergers and expansions that could catapult his empire to unimaginable heights. Word spread quickly in social circles. Alina received pitying glances at her local grocery store. Old friends texted, offering to help in any way, but no one knew quite what to do. Her parents, worried sick, begged her to come home, away from this madness. Yet Alina felt paralyzed, stuck in disbelief. The wedding date, the one she had planned for months, was creeping closer, but now it loomed like a sick joke. One sleepless night, she made a decision that felt both self-destructive and strangely necessary. She would attend Maxwell's wedding to Veronica Hall. She'd watch with her own eyes, force her mind to accept the stark reality. It was an act of defiance, or maybe self-torture. She wanted to see the final nail driven into the coffin of her illusions, believing that only by confronting this ultimate betrayal could she eventually find the strength to move on. The day Maxwell and Veronica exchanged vows dawned bright and merciless, as if the sun itself mocked Alina's anguish. The venue was a sprawling resort north of Chicago, tucked away amid lush gardens and ornate fountains. Guests arrived in sleek, luxury cars, stepping out in tailored suits and glittering gowns. Alina observed them from a discreet distance, wearing a loose-fitting dress that concealed her baby bump. She had chosen muted colors, hoping to blend into the background. Slipping inside the grand ballroom, Alina felt her lungs tighten. Everywhere she looked, there were white roses and cascading crystal chandeliers. A harpist played gentle melodies, the soft notes colliding with the lump in Alina's throat. She spotted Maxwell at the altar, striking in his tailored tuxedo. He stood next to a stunning woman in a dress of shimmering silk, Veronica Hall. The bride's aura radiated money and power. Alina's hand instinctively rested on her belly, where her child was stirring. She forced herself to witness the moment Maxwell and Veronica spoke their vows. Each word burned in Alina's mind, a cruel confirmation of everything she had lost. No one seemed to notice the trembling woman at the back, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. In a haze, she watched the kiss that sealed their union. Applause erupted. A parade of celebratory music followed. Alina could almost taste the bitterness in the air. Strangers congratulated the newlyweds, toasting their bright future together. Alina stumbled out the doors before the reception began, her heart pounding and her vision blurred by tears. She was alone with her devastation, carrying the child of a man who stood at that very moment with his new wife's ring on his finger. In the wake of that day, Alina knew her world had irrevocably changed. Gone were the illusions of a fairy tale wedding or a united family. Maxwell no longer contacted her, except for terse messages from his legal team, instructing her to consider a financial settlement in exchange for her silence. The entire spectacle felt like a twisted dream, but the steady growth of her baby bump reminded her it was all too real. She packed her belongings and fled to her parents' home just outside of Chicago. They welcomed her with tearful hugs, their modest house offering solace and warmth. Her mother rearranged the spare bedroom, laying soft blankets and preparing a corner for the baby's future crib. Alina sought refuge in these simple acts of domestic care, each gesture a balm for her shattered heart. At night, she found sleep impossible. She'd rest her hand on her belly, feeling the fluttering kicks inside. What future could she promise this child, now that their father was across town? Entangled in a new marriage? Some nights, rage flared in her chest. She resented Maxwell for his heartless betrayal. Other nights, she'd cry herself to exhaustion, mourning the dream of what could have been. Still, life demanded she move forward. She took up a part-time job at a local library, shelving books and processing returns. It was humble work, but it gave her a sense of routine. She clung to small goals, enroll in prenatal classes, save some money, find a more permanent place to raise her baby. In each passing day, she discovered a small shred of resilience she never knew she possessed. Alina's labor began on a cold January morning. Sleet drummed against the windows as her mother rushed her to the hospital in an old sedan that slipped on icy roads. Fear mingled with exhilaration as each contraction brought her closer to meeting her son, who had been her beacon of hope through months of darkness. After hours of pain and perseverance, Alina held a tiny, wailing newborn in her arms. She named him Lucas, a name that symbolized light in the midst of despair. Gazing upon his scrunched little face, she felt a profound love that transcended every bitter memory. Tears blurred her vision, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she cried with gratitude, not sorrow. Her parents hovered nearby, marveling at the new arrival. Nurse practitioners cooed over Lucas, remarking on his strong lungs and healthy weight. But the conspicuous absence of the father was impossible to ignore. Alina tried not to dwell on it. She had already learned the hard lesson that Maxwell's priorities lay elsewhere, wrapped in a marriage built on ulterior motives. Discharged after a few days, Alina brought Lucas home to the small nursery they'd pieced together in her parents' house. The space was simple but brimming with love. Pastel blankets, hand-painted animal decorations, and a rocking chair where Alina would sit at night, feeding and humming lullabies. Every coo and cry from Lucas reminded her of her promise to shield him from the heartbreak she endured. In the hush of those early mornings, as Lucas dozed in her arms, she vowed to carve out a life for them both, free from Maxwell's shadow. In the months following Lucas's birth, Alina fell into a steady routine. She rose before dawn to feed him, rocking gently in the old chair as the sun rose over the quiet suburban streets. Later in the day, she continued her library job while her mother or father watched Lucas. Though her bank account was stretched thin, she found fulfillment in each paycheck she earned honestly. This was her life now, a tapestry woven from small acts of responsibility and courage. She rarely heard from Maxwell. Once, a bouquet of flowers arrived at her parents' doorstep with a cursory note, "Congratulations, Maxwell." Alina placed the flowers in a vase, but their vibrant petals only reminded her of the hollowness behind the gesture. She received a few texts from lawyers representing Maxwell, offering child support if she signed non-disclosure agreements about his personal affairs. That money could have eased her burdens, but Alina's pride and anger ran deep. She refused to be bought into silence. Tucked into bed each night, she sometimes let her mind drift back to the moments of love she and Maxwell once shared. It pained her to think how genuine it had all felt, only to crumble so thoroughly when tested. Yet, the more she buried herself in Lucas's care, the more she discovered her own capacities for resilience. She realized that heartbreak could crush you or catalyze you into a stronger version of yourself. Slowly, she chose the latter path. If Maxwell wanted to remain a ghost in their lives, so be it. She had a son to raise and her own dignity to uphold, even if it meant doing so with little more than grit and determination. One afternoon, nearly a year after Lucas's birth, Alina was shelving books when she overheard two patrons whispering about Maxwell Pierce. Their hushed voices mentioned something about a shaky business deal and trouble with Veronica Hall. Alina tried to ignore the conversation, but her curiosity flared. She found her hands trembling. After her shift, she did a quick search on the library's computer. Headlines confirmed the rumors. Maxwell's company was embroiled in legal disputes, and investors were backing away. Scrolling further, Alina found gossip columns speculating on Maxwell and Veronica's marriage. Words like estranged and rocky appeared repeatedly. It seemed that their union was far from the polished, powerful facade it once was. A swirl of conflicting emotions sprang up in Alina. Part of her felt a biting satisfaction, some cosmic justice. Another part felt a twinge of pity, remembering the idealistic boy Maxwell had once been. That evening, she carried the weight of these revelations back home. She looked at Lucas babbling happily in his playpen, oblivious to the complex adult dramas swirling beyond their safe walls. Her heart ached for her child, who might someday wonder why his father wasn't around. But the news about Maxwell's turmoil unsettled her. She told herself it didn't change anything. She had chosen her path, forged her own life. Yet late at night, a whisper of fear crept in. What if Maxwell, stripped of his illusions of power, decided to reappear? What would that do to her newly won peace? Weeks later, Alina was leaving the library when she noticed a figure leaning against a sleek black car in the parking lot. As she drew closer, her heart clenched in recognition. Maxwell Pierce stood before her, looking exhausted and somehow aged beyond his years. Though he still wore an expensive coat, his once meticulously styled hair now had a few stray strands out of place. Her mind flashed with a torrent of memories: Starbucks, study sessions, the smell of expensive cologne, the ring from Tiffany and Company that once glinted on her hand. Now, all she felt was guarded apprehension. She clutched her purse tighter, resisting the urge to retreat back inside. Maxwell offered a hesitant smile, but his eyes were clouded with shame and desperation. "I'm sorry to ambush you like this," he began, voice subdued. I had to see you." Alina inhaled sharply, torn between curiosity and anger. "What do you want, Maxwell?" He hesitated, taking a cautious step forward. "It's been a long time. I heard about Lucas. I want to know him, Alina. I need to make things right." Betrayal burned hot in her chest. She shook her head, words catching in her throat. All she could muster was a low, bitter laugh. "You married another woman while I was pregnant. You disappeared. What gives you the right now?" Maxwell didn't protest. His shoulders sagged. "I have no right," he said quietly, "but I'm here, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Alina's eyes stung with unshed tears. Part of her wanted to slam the door on him forever. But another part, a quieter, more vulnerable side, reminded her of the child at home, who might benefit from a father's love, if that love was genuine. Whether Maxwell was capable of that remained to be seen. Alina couldn't sleep that night. Maxwell's unexpected return stirred emotions she had neatly tucked away. She replayed his words, "I want to know him," and wondered if that desire was rooted in love or guilt. She had spent over a year building a life free from his shadows, forging her own path as a mother and an independent woman. Yet, a single conversation was enough to fracture the emotional defenses she had erected. In the days that followed, she ignored Maxwell's calls and texts. She busied herself with Lucas, taking him to the park, where he toddled gleefully across the grass. She chatted with friends, who offered varying opinions on how to handle Maxwell's reappearance. Some advised caution, warning her not to let him disrupt her newly found stability. Others argued that if Maxwell had a change of heart, Lucas at least deserved to know his father. Eventually, she arranged a meeting in a neutral place, a modest cafe on the edge of town. Maxwell arrived early, appearing anxious. The conversation was stilted at first, with Alina's arms folded protectively across her chest. But Maxwell surprised her by admitting everything: how his marriage to Veronica was a strategic move that had since disintegrated, how his business empire was now in freefall, and how, despite all that, he couldn't stop thinking about the child he had abandoned. He spoke of his regret, using words that sounded almost genuine. Alina felt the stirrings of old pain. She told him, in no uncertain terms, that trust wouldn't be built overnight. If he truly wanted a place in Lucas's life, he'd have to prove it. Whether Maxwell realized it or not, the real test had just begun. A week later, Maxwell texted Alina, requesting to meet Lucas. After wrestling with her doubts, she agreed to let him visit her parents' house, where she still stayed with her son. The tension in the living room was palpable as Maxwell entered, bearing a small plush dinosaur for Lucas. Alina's mother watched warily from the kitchen. Her father stood by the mantel, arms crossed. Lucas, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around him, eyed Maxwell curiously. The toddler took tentative steps forward, drawn by the new toy. Maxwell knelt to greet him, voice trembling slightly as he introduced himself. Alina observed her son, reading the flicker of excitement in his eyes when Maxwell mimicked a dinosaur roar to make him laugh. A lump formed in her throat, part resentment, part relief. She had feared Lucas might be scared or aloof, but children have a way of embracing the present moment without the baggage adults carry. The visit was brief. Maxwell stayed for about an hour, playing with blocks and answering Lucas's babbled questions with a mixture of amusement and wonder. When it was time for him to leave, he paused at the doorway. Looking at Alina, he whispered, "Thank you. I know I don't deserve this chance, but I'm grateful." She just nodded, her face impassive. Only when he was gone did she exhale, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. Maybe this was a step towards something. Maybe it was just another heartbreak waiting to happen. In the quiet evenings that followed, Alina's mind churned with memories she had tried so hard to bury. She remembered the early days with Maxwell, his eager questions about her life, the way he'd volunteer at her local food drive just to spend extra time with her. She recalled their engagement dinner, the glint in his eye as he slipped the Tiffany ring onto her finger. And she remembered the utter devastation of standing in the back of that grand hall, pregnant and alone, while he married another woman. Maxwell's visits grew more frequent. He'd come by to see Lucas on weekends, sometimes bringing modest gifts, children's books or coloring sets. He seemed determined to rebuild a relationship with his son, though he remained cautious around Alina's parents, who still eyed him with justified suspicion. Occasionally, Maxwell asked Alina about her life, her work, her plans for the future. She answered tersely, determined not to offer too much, too soon. One Saturday, Maxwell offered to take Lucas to a nearby children's museum. After a long internal debate, Alina agreed, but on the condition that she come along. Navigating colorful exhibits, she watched Maxwell hold Lucas's hand as they explored interactive displays. The sight tugged at her heart. It was so easy to imagine them as a normal family, if she let herself slip into that fantasy. But the ring on his finger, his wedding band from the ill-fated marriage to Veronica, still shone in the fluorescent light, a stark reminder that reality was far more complicated. As if summoned by the tension building within Alina's life, Veronica Hall reappeared in headlines. Gossip sites swirled with reports of her filing for divorce. Allegations of financial impropriety and emotional neglect colored every article, painting Veronica as a vengeful spouse seeking a lion's share of Maxwell's dwindling empire. When Alina read these stories, her stomach twisted into knots. She wondered how Maxwell would navigate this new turmoil and how it might spill over into her and Lucas's life. One afternoon, Maxwell arrived for a scheduled visit, face drawn with fatigue. Alina led him into the living room, where Lucas was playing with blocks. She could see the worry etched into Maxwell's eyes. Without prompting, he explained that Veronica was demanding an astronomical settlement, threatening to expose damaging secrets about his business if he refused. He also mentioned that she'd recently discovered his renewed contact with Alina, which only fueled her anger. Alina's first instinct was to tell him it was none of her concern. She had her own battles to fight, and she didn't owe him sympathy after the way he'd left her. Yet, part of her recognized the pain and regret behind his words. Maxwell wasn't the untouchable magnate she once knew. He was unraveling, facing the implosion of his carefully curated life. She softened slightly. "Lucas and I are not a bargaining chip for your negotiations," she warned, voice firm. "If you want to be in his life, I can't have you dragging him into your legal nightmares." Maxwell nodded, genuine gratitude flooding his face. "I swear, I'm doing everything I can to protect him and you." Alina held her breath, fighting the urge to believe him entirely. She couldn't risk letting hope blind her to the possibility of new wounds. Days stretched into weeks, and Maxwell's legal battle with Veronica intensified. Rumors abounded of hush money, suspicious bank transfers, and potential investigations by the SEC. Alina did her best to shield Lucas from the noise, focusing on routine morning walks, story time, and play dates. But each time Maxwell visited, she could sense the weight bearing down on him. One evening, Maxwell asked Alina if he could speak with her privately. They sat on the couch, a respectful distance apart. He looked drained, shadows under his eyes betraying nights of lost sleep. In a hesitant voice, he recounted how Veronica had threatened to destroy him entirely if he didn't comply with her financial demands. He also confessed that one of his closest advisors had embezzled funds, leaving his business in tatters. The once stellar empire he'd built now hung by a thread, and Veronica held the scissors. Alina listened, feeling an unsteady mixture of pity and anger. Pity because she remembered the Maxwell who once gave her everything, and anger because his unbridled ambition had led to the heartbreak that tore them apart. "Where does that leave Lucas and me?" she asked carefully. Maxwell swallowed hard. "I'm hoping you'll let me keep seeing him," he said softly. "And I'm asking for time. I want to rebuild what I can, do right by you both. I know I can't change the past." Alina lowered her gaze. She had learned the hard way that illusions crumble when tested. Still, she nodded, "If only for Lucas's sake." "Then you need to handle your affairs without dragging us in," she said. "Prove to me you're not just repeating old patterns." Amid the turmoil, Maxwell's efforts to connect with Lucas became more earnest. He joined them for a trip to the zoo, hoisting Lucas onto his shoulders so the boy could peer at giraffes munching leaves. Alina watched from a short distance, noticing how Lucas giggled in unrestrained delight, how Maxwell's eyes sparkled with genuine affection. It was a stark departure from the suave but distant man she once knew. During one of these outings, as Lucas played with wooden toy animals on a park bench, Maxwell turned to Alina. "I realize I never asked how you managed after I left," he said, his voice catching. "I never wanted you to suffer, but I know you did." Anger and sadness bubbled within her. "You have no idea," she replied, her voice hushed. "I went from planning a wedding to single motherhood, all while watching the tabloids praise you and Veronica as some power couple." Maxwell's shoulders drooped. "I was blinded," he admitted. "By greed, ambition, Veronica offered me a way to expand my business in ways I never thought possible. I didn't see how hollow it all was until it was too late." Alina wanted to lash out, to remind him that too late had come with irreversible damage. But as she watched Lucas shuffle around happily, she simply sighed. "There are some things you can't take back," she said, "but maybe you can learn from them." They sat in charged silence, the sounds of children's laughter and rustling leaves filling the air. For the first time in a long while, Alina sensed something akin to real remorse in Maxwell. Whether it would endure the storms ahead remained a question only time could answer. The swirling rumors about Veronica's lawsuit took a dramatic turn when she announced a press conference, claiming she possessed incriminating documents that would seal Maxwell's fate. It made front-page news in local tabloids and garnered national interest among business channels. Alina braced herself for the potential fallout, dreading what might happen if Veronica chose to reveal personal details involving Lucas. Maxwell called Alina one night, voice trembling. "She has more on me than I realized. If she goes public, everything I own will be seized or under investigation. She could drag you and Lucas into this." His panic was palpable, and for the first time, Alina heard the vulnerability of a man who might finally grasp the full cost of his betrayal. Alina forced down the surge of anxiety. "I won't let her use Lucas as a bargaining chip," she said firmly. "If she tries to bring him into this, I'll fight. But I need to know you're not hiding anything else from me." Silence lingered on the line. "I promise," Maxwell finally said, almost pleading. "No more secrets. I swear to you I'm cooperating with every investigation." revealing every hidden asset. "I want a clean slate." In that moment, Alina recognized how cornered he was. She felt a small pang of pity. She remembered the day he first approached her at the community college library, a younger Maxwell full of lofty ideals. That man was now unrecognizable, shattered by greed and short-sighted decisions. Yet, if he was truly turning a corner for Lucas's sake, maybe, just maybe, there was hope in that. Veronica's promised press conference turned out to be less explosive than predicted. She presented vague allegations about Maxwell's mismanagement and potential fraud, but the evidence she offered lacked the teeth to dismantle him entirely. Still, it left Maxwell in dire legal jeopardy, forcing him into a lengthy court battle over both his business dealings and the divorce settlement. Alina couldn't help feeling a simmer of relief. For all her anger and resentment, she never wanted Lucas's father to end up behind bars or bankrupt. What she did want was assurance that Maxwell would be present and accountable for their child. She attended a couple of the early court sessions, partly out of a sense of closure, partly because Maxwell had requested she stand as a character witness for his fatherhood commitment, an ironic request, considering how he had vanished during her pregnancy. To the surprise of many, Alina agreed to appear before the judge. She spoke carefully about Maxwell's renewed involvement in Lucas's life, how he consistently visited the boy and showed genuine remorse for past transgressions. She didn't mince words about his earlier failures, but she highlighted his recent sincerity. The judge took her testimony into account, remarking that while Maxwell faced serious financial and legal consequences, he seemed to be making efforts to atone for his parental shortcomings. As Alina left the courthouse, cameras clicked and reporters shouted questions about her relationship with Maxwell. She ignored them, holding her head high. In that moment, she realized she was no longer the naive fiancée from years ago. She had grown into a woman who knew her worth, who understood that forgiveness, if it ever came, would be on her terms alone. Days turned into weeks, and Maxwell's legal battles slowly crawled forward. Meanwhile, his involvement with Lucas continued to deepen. Alina allowed him unsupervised visits, though she remained on edge each time. Lucas left her sight. Maxwell, for his part, seemed committed, arriving punctually and returning Lucas well-fed, content, and full of stories about their adventures, like watching airplanes at O'Hare Airport or feeding ducks at a local pond. In these quiet intervals, Alina discovered she had space to breathe. She added shifts at the library, saving money for a future home for herself and Lucas. She'd already completed some online courses in early childhood education, fueling her dream of becoming a teacher. Sometimes, after Lucas was tucked in at night, she allowed herself a fleeting vision of a stable home, a small house with a yard where Lucas could play, free from the echoes of heartbreak that had shaped his earliest days. One afternoon, as she was gathering library returns, Maxwell walked in unexpectedly. He held a cup of coffee for her and flashed a faint, self-conscious smile. "I wanted to see if you needed anything," he said, his tone more gentle than she remembered. She studied him, noticing the subtle changes, a humbler posture, less of the cocky swagger that once defined him. "We're fine," she replied, nodding her thanks for the coffee. Then, after a moment of contemplation, she added, "Actually, if you have time, there's a family event at the library next week. Lucas might enjoy it." Maxwell's eyes lit up. "I'd love to come," he said, as if being included in such an ordinary outing was more valuable than any boardroom deal. Alina managed a small smile. Maybe this was how healing began, with small, cautious steps toward normalcy, even after the deepest scars. Alina battled conflicting emotions regarding Maxwell. A part of her felt drawn to the quieter, more earnest man. He was becoming a far cry from the man who had shattered her life. Yet the memory of his betrayal was ever present. like a bruise that refused to fade. Could she truly forgive him, or was this reconciliation solely for Lucas's benefit? She opened up to a trusted friend, Mia, confiding how confusion weighed on her each time she saw Maxwell interact with Lucas. Mia listened sympathetically, reminding Alina that the choice to forgive or let him in romantically again was hers alone, and it didn't have to be rushed. "Heart wounds take time," Mia said gently. "He hurt you in one of the worst ways possible, but people can change. Only you can decide if that change is genuine and worth trusting." That weekend, Alina found herself at the park with Maxwell and Lucas, who giggled while chasing squirrels. The warmth of the late spring sun bathed them in gold light. Maxwell seemed at ease, his attention focused on Lucas's every move. Alina felt a swell of sadness mixed with longing, wishing for an alternate reality where none of the heartbreak had happened, where this scene was just a normal day in a family's life. She caught Maxwell watching her. His eyes held a silent apology, something deep and sorrowful that words couldn't fully articulate. For a fleeting moment, she let herself imagine what it might be like to trust him again, then quickly banished the thought, reminding herself that illusions had nearly destroyed her once before. Even as Maxwell struggled to reinvent himself, the legal saga with Veronica continued. Alina received another summons, not just for the civil proceedings, but for a criminal investigation involving Maxwell's companies. Investigators were uncovering a tangled web of mismanaged funds, suspicious partnerships, and shady accounting. Alina worried that, no matter how earnest his current efforts, Maxwell's past might still cripple his future and, by extension, Lucas's as well. One day, while rummaging through old paperwork to gather any documents that might be relevant to the case, Alina stumbled upon an old diary. She had kept it during her pregnancy, journaling the lonely nights and her hopes for the child she carried. Flipping through the pages, she found tear-stained entries describing her heartbreak. She read about the ultrasound Maxwell missed, the baby kicks she felt without anyone to share the excitement. She saw the bitterness that bled onto the page when the wedding invitation for Maxwell and Veronica's nuptials arrived, a mocking testament to her heartbreak. Those emotions came rushing back like a tidal wave. She sank to the floor, hugging the diary to her chest. Could she ever fully move past the pain described in those pages? Or would that betrayal forever color how she saw Maxwell? When she finally closed the diary, she realized that it wasn't just about letting Maxwell back into her life. It was about reclaiming the pieces of herself she had lost. She had to decide whether this journey of forgiveness was worth the risk, or if she should finalize the boundaries around her heart once and for all. The next time Maxwell visited, Alina couldn't contain the turmoil inside her. After Lucas went to bed, she invited Maxwell to sit on the porch where fairy lights twinkled in the dusk. Summoning her courage, she showed him the old diary, flipping to an entry describing the day she found out about his wedding. Her voice shook as she read aloud her raw pain, how she felt suffocated by betrayal, how she wept so hard that she nearly passed out. Maxwell listened in stunned silence, his hands clenched around the porch railing. When she finished, tears glistened in his eyes under the soft glow of the porch light. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. "I was a fool. I let greed and ambition blind me. I told myself I was doing it all for a future, but I destroyed the very thing that mattered most." Alina's own tears slipped free. "Do you have any idea what it was like?" she asked, her tone wavering between anger and heartbreak. "I was alone, pregnant, while you threw a wedding I never asked for details of, but had to witness with my own eyes." Maxwell reached for her hand, but she pulled back slightly, uncertain. "I know I can't undo the past," he said, "but please believe me when I say I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, to be a father to Lucas, and to show you I've learned." They sat there in the hush of night, the air thick with shared regret and a fragile thread of hope. For the first time, Alina allowed herself to believe that maybe Maxwell's remorse was real. Whether her heart could fully open to him again, however, was still an unanswered question in the quiet hours before dawn. Over the following weeks, Alina noticed tangible changes in Maxwell's daily behavior. His once constant phone calls dwindled. He dedicated weekends to Lucas, taking him to library story times, teaching him simple games, even cooking meals alongside Alina in her parents' modest kitchen. Her mother watched these transformations with cautious acceptance, while her father remained guarded, unsure whether Maxwell's remorse would stand the test of time. Maxwell's court battles persisted, but he cooperated fully with the authorities, revealing hidden ledgers and naming associates involved in illegal activities. The media painted him as a tarnished golden boy, a millionaire undone by the very empire he had built. Yet, behind closed doors, Alina could see him wrestle with the ghosts of his decisions. Some nights, he arrived with dark circles under his eyes, only to light up when Lucas toddled over, shouting "Daddy" with unbridled joy. One evening, Alina found Maxwell sitting alone in the living room after Lucas had gone to bed. He held an older photo of them back when they were college students, glowing with innocent love. He glanced up, eyes heavy with memory. "We used to dream so big," he murmured, "about building a better world, about philanthropy projects and traveling. I lost sight of what really mattered." Alina sank into an armchair across from him. She recalled her own naive dreams, how she believed love could conquer all obstacles. "We can't go back," she said gently, "but maybe we can find a new way forward if we're careful." Maxwell nodded, understanding that her words were an invitation, but also a caution. Their new foundation, if it existed, had to be built with honesty, humility, and patience. As summer arrived, Alina felt an unexpected warmth bloom inside her, one that went beyond the season's sunny days. She watched Maxwell bond with Lucas more seamlessly. They laughed together over silly cartoons, tried new foods at neighborhood fairs, and even planted a small herb garden in Alina's backyard. Lucas's favorite pastime became watering the seedlings, splashing more water on himself than on the plants, while Maxwell gently guided his tiny hands. Alina's parents observed these scenes from the porch, exchanging glances that spoke of cautious optimism. Her mother approached her one afternoon, while Maxwell and Lucas were in the yard. "He seems different," she said quietly. "Kinder, more grounded. It's good for Lucas to have that from his father." Alina nodded, heart fluttering with conflicting emotions. "I know, but I can't forget how much he hurt me." Her mother patted her hand. "Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means choosing not to let that pain control your life. Just be sure to protect yourself." Later that week, Maxwell tentatively asked if Alina might consider going on a simple outing with him without Lucas, just for a few hours. Alina hesitated. She remembered the heartbreak, the magnitude of betrayal, but a quiet voice inside her, one fueled by hope and weariness from anger, nudged her forward. "All right," she said softly, "but let's keep it casual. Just coffee." They met at a local cafe, a cozy spot filled with battered bookshelves and antique lamps. As they sipped their drinks, conversation flowed more naturally than she expected, touching on memories, acknowledging mistakes, and considering the future. For the first time in years, Alina found herself smiling freely in Maxwell's presence. It felt like stepping into a new chapter, penned with caution but illuminated by the faint glow of trust. Their tentative friendship deepened in the weeks that followed. Although Alina's guard remained up, she allowed herself to enjoy Maxwell's company in measured doses. They spoke openly about their shared history, the anguish Alina experienced during her pregnancy, Maxwell's misguided chase for power, and the emptiness that eventually consumed him. Maxwell never shied away from admitting his failures, an honesty that both surprised and softened her. Meanwhile, Lucas thrived. His vocabulary expanded, and he began stringing together adorable sentences that showcased a happy toddler's bright mind. He'd run to Maxwell whenever he arrived, shouting, "Daddy, play!" with a grin that melted everyone's heart. Alina, quietly observing, wondered if a stable family unit, one she had once imagined, could be rekindled from these ashes. Then came a pivotal night when Maxwell invited her to a dinner at a modest Italian restaurant he'd discovered. They dined on homemade pasta, discussing everything from Lucas's preschool prospects to Maxwell's uncertain financial future once the legal battles concluded. Eventually, he set his fork down and reached across the table, gently taking Alina's hand. "I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try again," he said, voice tight with emotion. "I want us to be a family, not just for Lucas, but because I still love you." Alina's chest constricted. She'd anticipated this question, but hearing it out loud felt different. Memories of betrayal flashed through her mind, like ghosts at the edges of a flickering candle flame. She took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. "I need time," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And I need proof that things will be different. I can't survive another heartbreak like that." Maxwell nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I'll wait as long as you need," he said, quietly resolving to prove himself worthy of her love once more. Time indeed became their most critical ally. Over the ensuing months, Maxwell finalized his divorce from Veronica, who ended up with a substantial settlement but ultimately failed in her attempts to bury him completely. Maxwell's restructured business emerged as a smaller, more transparent entity, focused on ethical investments rather than the dizzying, high-stakes gambles of his past. Though he was no longer a glamorous millionaire in the headlines, he seemed almost relieved to be free of the constant scrutiny and moral compromise. Alina noticed these shifts and, with each passing day, found the walls around her heart lowering inch by cautious inch. She saw how Maxwell handled small crises, a late daycare payment for Lucas, a repair needed on her parents' old car. Instead of throwing money at the problems or brushing them off, he tackled them with humility and practical solutions. Every demonstration of responsibility, every gentle act of kindness toward her and Lucas, chipped away at the lingering bitterness that clung to her soul. Eventually, Maxwell asked if she would consider couples counseling, suggesting that a professional mediator might help them navigate the complicated emotions of their past. Alina agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to address her lingering trauma and his lingering guilt in a structured environment. Their sessions were intense and often tearful, with Maxwell confronting the depth of Alina's pain and Alina grappling with the possibility that redemption could be real. Through these small but consistent steps, something that resembled love began to blossom again. It wasn't the naive, starry-eyed devotion of their early days. It was a fragile but stronger bond, built on the wreckage of old mistakes and the hope for a better tomorrow. On a crisp autumn afternoon, several years after Alina had first learned she was pregnant, she found herself standing in front of a small group of family and close friends. The location was a rustic barn venue just outside of Chicago, its wooden beams draped with fairy lights and autumn leaves. In a heartfelt, intimate ceremony far from the lavish spectacle that once defined Maxwell's life, Alina wore a simple lace dress, her eyes shining with cautious joy. Lucas, now a bright-eyed preschooler, stood beside her, grinning from ear to ear as the ring-bearer. Across from her, Maxwell waited, looking both humbled and radiant in a tailored suit that bore none of the flashy arrogance of his past. This time, the vows they exchanged were forged through the fires of betrayal and regret, tempered by growth and genuine remorse. Every phrase they spoke resonated with the hard-earned knowledge that love is a choice made again and again, even in the face of heartbreak. As Alina slid the ring onto Maxwell's finger, she felt years of pain and healing converge into that single moment. Their guests, some of whom had witnessed the tumultuous history, smiled through tears, understanding the weight of this union. Lucas scampered up to them, hugging both parents around the knees, eliciting soft laughter. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Alina and Maxwell sealed their commitment with a kiss that tasted of redemption. This was no fairy tale ending, but rather the start of a new journey. They had discovered that real love isn't about perfection, it's about resilience, accountability, and the willingness to grow together. Life has a way of testing the promises we make, forcing us to confront mistakes and discover new depths of strength. Alina and Maxwell's path was riddled with betrayal, shattered dreams, and painful lessons. Yet, out of the embers of their past, they built something far more resilient than youthful infatuation, a bond grounded in honesty, atonement, and genuine partnership. Their story shows that while trust may be fragile, it can also be mended with time, dedication, and a true willingness to change. If Alina and Maxwell's journey resonated with you, please share this video so others can witness the power of redemption and the beauty of a second chance. Leave a comment about your thoughts on forgiveness or overcoming life's hardest trials. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that speak to the transformative strength of the human heart. Your support helps keep hope alive for all of us.